Now, in thinking maps have been carefully designed to tap into the way the brain learns and remembers information. Specifically, it is built around these six key concepts in neuroscience related to how the brain processes and encodes information and how it decides what is important enough to pay attention to and remember. So these six key points, these six key concepts presented to you about the current brain research and how Thinking Map supports each one cannot be done in isolation. Building a brain-based classroom is more than just applying a series of disconnected brain-based learning strategies. It's actually a holistic approach to learning, and that ties directly into the brain and how it functions. The brain is more of an imaging processor more so than a word processor. And that is because the brain is built to prioritize visual information. The visual cortex is the part of the brain where visual information is processed. It's the largest system of the brain, and it's highly evolved to process complex information, has tremendous processing power, and in fact, it can probably interpret up to 36,000 images per hour. We know that images are more likely to go to long-term storage. In fact, 90% of the information that comes into the brain is visual, and about 40% of the nerve fibers connected to the brain are linked to our retinas. And by adding words to the visual patterns, it takes advantage of what is called dual coding, using both visual and language processing parts of the brain simultaneously. Dual coding strengthens memory by activating multiple centers in the brain. So, thinking maps are a visual language for learning. And when students put information into a visual pattern, they are activating the visual cortex to stimulate memory as well as layering on language for deep understanding. So if you were to take a look at these eight visuals again, each of them correspond to a specific type of thinking. These eight modes of thinking underlie all learning across all content areas, across all grades. These are the eight main ways that the brain processes information. Thinking maps makes these cognitive processes visible and concrete. Students learn how to recognize signal words in written assignments and textbooks, and it tells them what type of thinking is required. And then they pull out the right map to capture the information. So here's an example. Here's a sample passage, no different than what our current students are reading right now. Allowing students to analyze the signal words the author uses, and then using what we know about signal words will determine the text structure and allow students to figure out the author's purpose. So in this passage, if the author is using words like both, alike, similar, or difference, then the question to ask your readers is, what is the text structure? Why would the author want to use these words? Well, the author is using these words to compare and contrast some key information. They can then determine the tool they will use to gather the facts. So the visual map that the students would use in this example would be what we call a double bubble map. The visual maps help students clearly see how ideas are related as a conceptual net. Metacognition is all about thinking about thinking. Metacognition is defined as an awareness of one's thinking and learning processes. It involves understanding what you already know and the task and what is required for this learning opportunity. Now, Thinking Maps does help students activate metacognition processes by giving them a consistent platform for thinking. We're integrating metacognition in an explicit, structured, and cumulative fashion that creates a community of thinking in the classroom that benefits all learners. There's a lot of research on metacognition, but very little in the practical application of it. Teachers, we need to know how to close that gap of the knowing and the doing gap based on Quigley's work. Thinking Maps is a highly efficient and effective tool for teaching and for learning. Metacognition doesn't just level the playing field, it actually raises the playing field for all of our students.